There are many days throughout the year, Father, where the introit of the Mass begins with the Psalm 36, verse 30, the mouth of the just shall meditate wisdom and his tongue shall speak judgment. Could you explain what exactly that means, Father?
Well, there are masses for confessors non-pontiffs, meaning that they're priests who are not bishops, essentially, okay? St. Thomas Aquinas, St. John Bosco, so many others, St. Raymond Nonatus, and so on. These are men who are clergymen, priests, but they were not ordained, consecrated bishops, so they're not pontiffs, okay? And that Mass, well, one of the two of those begins with that introit, right? But it sounds like there are many Masses through the year because there's so many of those feast days of priests who are not bishops, but they are saints, okay? And so you hear that expression very often during the year, whenever there's a feast day of a confessor non-pontiff, unless they're using the other template for Mass. You know, part of the confusion, I suppose, comes in with the word meditari. Read that again, please, Tom. Okay, good.
The mouth of the just shall meditate wisdom and his tongue shall speak judgment.
Well, when you say the mouth of the just shall meditate wisdom, do you find that confusing?
I think so.
Why?
Mouths usually don't meditate.
Okay.
And meditate.
So the issue really comes down to shall meditate. We have to take the word meditate in a way that we usually don't mean it in English. And I thought, as soon as I read that, well, the confusion comes in because the verb for meditate in Latin is deponent. It is a deponent verb. What does that mean? It means that its form is passive, but its meaning is active. So it has a passive form, as though it were something receiving the action, but it is translated as with an active statement. So the mouth meditates, right? But the significance of it in the Latin is that the mouth, as it were, the mouth speaks of what it's pondering. What it's pondering, the mysteries of faith. The verb meditare, it's not meditare, it's meditari. And the verbal form is in a passive form. And these words like that, like loquor and so on, have a very special, nuanced meaning in Latin that needs to be translated well into English. To say the mouth meditates, to us, it seems very awkward. But if you read the Latin and you understand the significance of the Latin, then you see it has to do with what actually comes out of the mouth actually is the fruit of the meditation. Meditari comes from the word media or medius, which means in the middle. The idea behind the word to meditate, etymologically, is that you are kind of in the middle of these concepts. Here, we're talking about wisdom. We're talking about matters of faith, the mysteries of faith. It's as though your mind is surrounded by these things, and you are pondering these things, turning them over in your mind, considering them, examining them. The significance is that this is what comes out of the mouth of a man. These are the thoughts that come out of the mouth of a man whose mind is actually pondering the mysteries of faith. So, you have to kind of go beyond the verbal expression, which in English, yes, it sounds rather awkward. The mouth shall meditate wisdom. And most people aren't going to go studying the Latin from which that is translated to say, okay, well, what does this actually mean in the original language? But remember, we're talking about Psalms here, right? We're talking about Psalms that were originally in Hebrew and that were translated then into Greek in the Septuagint. So if one really wanted to go back to say, okay, this in English sounds a little awkward, where does it come from? To the Latin, the Greek, the Hebrew, one could actually go back and examine that. But I'm just trying to give you a little heads up there that because the word in Latin from which that is translated is a deponent verb, it does come across rather awkward in the way it's translated. But if you ask, well, what is the meaning of it? And I think maybe if I asked the question a little bit differently, if I said, okay, I understand what the phrase means or how it sounds in English, but what do you think it should mean? I think you probably would have said, well, clearly it must mean that the mouth speaks, but what it speaks is the result of its meditation and pondering divine wisdom and the mysteries of faith. And I would say, well, yeah. So believe it or not, yeah, I think most people would actually come up with exactly the right interpretation, but it would be an interpretation.
Yeah.
That's the point.